My car was gone. Not towed. Not stolen by some random criminal. Just gone from my parking spot after a long day at work. And when I called my parents, panicking, thinking maybe they knew something, my mother's response was so casual it made my blood run cold. "Oh honey, relax. We gave it to Savannah. She needs it more than you do." They gave away my car. The car I spent 6 years saving for. My first brand new vehicle. Just handed the keys to my sister like it was a jacket they were borrowing. That's when I knew this wasn't about a car anymore. This was about every boundary they'd ever crossed, every sacrifice I'd made that they'd taken for granted, every time they'd chosen her comfort over my dignity. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called the police and reported it stolen. Let me back up, because this story doesn't start with a missing car. It starts with a childhood where I learned that being the strong one was just code for the one we can take from without consequences. My name is Clara. I'm 30 years old, a software engineer in Denver, and I've spent most of my life being invisible in all the ways that hurt. On the outside, I look put together. Clean clothes, makeup done right, calm voice in meetings. The kind of person people call reliable and mature. But inside, I've spent decades swallowing things whole. Hurt. Disappointment. Rage. Until they sat in my stomach like stones. My younger sister Savannah was always the spirited one. The delicate one who felt things too deeply, who needed extra protection from the harsh world. My parents orbited around her like she was made of glass, while assuming I could weather any storm because I never complained loud enough. The thing about being the strong child is that nobody tells you it's a trap. They praise you for it when you're young. Clara is so responsible. Clara never makes trouble. Clara always figures it out. And you believe them because you're a kid and you want to make your parents proud. But what they're really saying is, Clara won't break down if we neglect her. Clara won't cause a scene if things aren't fair. Clara will sacrifice herself quietly. And once you accept that role, once you prove you can carry weight without complaint, they just keep loading more on. When we were teenagers, the pattern was already clear. I worked part-time after school, wiping down tables at a diner, counting out coins, saving for months to buy a used laptop with a fan that sounded like it was dying. I remember the day I finally had enough money. I walked to the electronics store after my shift, still wearing my uniform that smelled like fryer grease, and bought it with cash I'd counted out 3 times to make sure. I was so proud when I got it home. The next morning, I watched my mother place a brand new MacBook on Savannah's bed. She needs it for a project, Mom told me when she saw my face. I nodded, pretended the ground hadn't just shifted under my feet. Pretended I didn't notice that my laptop, with its cracked screen and dying battery, was somehow not needed the same way. That night, I cried in the shower where nobody could hear me. And I told myself it was fine. It was just a laptop. I was being petty. But it wasn't fine. It was the first time I really understood that in my family, my effort didn't matter as much as Savannah's comfort. At 18, Savannah borrowed my bike. Just for an hour, she promised. It came back 2 days later, lying in the rain behind her friend's house. Chain rusted. Seat torn. Mud caked in the gears. "Don't be dramatic," my father said when I showed him. "You can fix it." She didn't mean any harm. I spent 3 hours in the garage that weekend, trying to scrub rust off the chain with steel wool. The bike was never the same after that. It squeaked when I pedaled, and the gears stuck. But I rode it anyway, because buying a new one meant months of saving again, and I'd learned not to expect replacements. That's when I learned the rule in my family: intention mattered more than impact. At least when it came to Savannah. College was brutal. I balanced 2 jobs, spent long nights in the library surviving on instant coffee and stress, constantly trying to prove I could make it on my own. I wanted so badly to show them I didn't need help, that I was as capable as they always said I was. Then one semester, my savings mysteriously disappeared from my account. I remember standing at the ATM, staring at the balance in disbelief, checking it 3 times. Then calling the bank, thinking there must be fraud, some mistake. There was no mistake. I found out weeks later they'd been used to cover one of Savannah's classes after she missed the payment deadline. My mother told me this over coffee, casual as anything, like she was mentioning the weather. My mother brushed it off like it was nothing. Family helps family, Clara. But you didn't ask me, I said quietly. She looked confused. Why would I need to ask? It's family money. Family money. My money, earned from double shifts and skipped meals, was family money. But Savannah's needs were always individual, always urgent, always more important than mine. By the time I graduated and moved to Denver, I'd stopped expecting fairness. Independence felt safer than hope. I built my life quietly, paid my bills on time, fixed my own problems, never asked for anything. And after 6 long years of sacrifice, I finally bought something that felt completely mine. A silver 2023 Camry. Clean. Reliable. Earned with my own money, every single payment. I remember the day I drove it off the lot. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but not from fear. From pride. From this overwhelming feeling that I'd finally done something just for me. My parents congratulated me, but I saw something else in their eyes. This faint discomfort, like my success, created an imbalance they didn't know how to handle. Savannah had totaled 3 cars in 5 years. 3. Each one replaced by my parents without question, without consequence. The first time, she rear-ended someone while doing her makeup. The second, she was texting and didn't see a red light. The third, she was driving home from a party and swerved into a ditch. Every time, my parents rushed to comfort her. It could happen to anyone, they'd say. Cars can be replaced. But my car was different. It carried every late shift, every sacrifice, every ounce of pride I'd built completely alone. Which is why that empty parking spot didn't feel like a random theft. It felt like a pattern I'd spent my whole life trying to escape. The moment I saw that empty space, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I'd parked on a different level. Maybe there was some mistake with towing. Maybe I was just exhausted and remembering wrong. But after walking the parking lot 4 times, cold clarity settled in my chest. My car wasn't misplaced. It was gone. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called my parents, expecting them to help me figure out what happened. My mother picked up on the second ring, cheerful like she'd been expecting good news. "Mom," I gasped. "My car is gone." "Was it towed? Do you know?" "Oh honey, relax. We gave it to Savannah. She needs it more than you do." Just like that. Soft voice, casual tone, like she was telling me she'd borrowed a sweater. Not a $30,000 vehicle I'd spent 6 years earning. "What?" My voice cracked. You gave it to her. She has that new job," Mom said, like this explained everything. "She can't be taking the bus. You'll manage for a few days. Don't make this bigger than it is." I stood frozen in that parking lot. The sounds around me got muffled, distant traffic, the hum of streetlights, my heart pounding in my ears. My father's voice cut in. He'd been listening the whole time. "It's still in the family, Clara. You're overreacting. We all share. Remember when we helped you in college? You used my savings to pay for Savannah's class," I whispered. "That wasn't helping me." Silence. Then my mother sighed. Disappointed. Like I was the problem. "Don't start that again. Your sister is trying. She's had a rough time." Rough time. The same rough time she'd been having for 10 years. Images hit me hard. Savannah crying after totaling her first car, my parents hugging her, saying it was just bad luck. Savannah destroying the second one while texting, the front end folded like paper. My father murmuring that she was shaken, that we shouldn't scold her. Savannah partying too hard and wrecking the third. My mother insisting she needed support, not judgment. 3 cars destroyed in 5 years. And now mine. My first new car. My small miracle. Handed to her like a spare pair of shoes. "Mom," I said slowly, forcing the words out. "I didn't give anyone permission. You took my key. You took my car. We borrowed it," she insisted, her voice getting sharp. "Stop being selfish." Selfish. That word cut deep. Familiar, like an old bruise I'd been pressing on my whole life. Something inside me bent. Then snapped. All those years of swallowing things. Of fixing what wasn't mine to fix. Of pretending their choices didn't shred me. Every ignored boundary, every time they said I was strong enough to handle it. "How did you even get my key?" I asked suddenly, the question hitting me. A pause. Then my mother, quieter, we still have your spare. From when we visited last month. Last month, when they'd stayed at my apartment and I'd given them a spare key in case they needed anything. A key I'd never asked for back because I trusted them. The betrayal of it settled over me like ice water. I wasn't strong in that moment. I was shaking with a rage so quiet it almost felt cold. Give Savannah a few days, my father said. She'll bring it back. No, I said. She won't. My mother's voice sharpened. Don't do anything stupid, Clara. But they'd already revealed their truth with one word, family. Family was the shield they hid behind. Family was the excuse for every violation. Family was the leash they counted on me never cutting. For the first time, I saw it clearly. I wasn't the strong one. I was the one they expected would never fight back. Not anymore. I pulled the phone from my ear. My mother's voice was still coming through, scolding me, but I didn't listen. I hung up and dialed 911. Officer McCarthy arrived 20 minutes later. The evening sun was sinking behind the Denver buildings, washing everything in orange light. When she stepped out of her patrol car, her presence alone made me feel steadier. I handed her every document I had. Registration. Insurance. Payment records. My fingers were still trembling. All under your name? She asked. Yes. Completely mine. She nodded, her expression tightening slightly. And no one had permission to take it. No one. Hearing myself say it out loud, clearly, firmly, felt like stepping onto solid ground for the first time in years. McCarthy photographed the empty spot, glanced at the security camera overhead, and radioed in a bolo. When she said Savannah's name into that radio, my sister's name, it punched the air out of my lungs. Family theft cases are still theft, she added, looking at me. The law doesn't make exceptions for feelings. Her words hit harder than the missing car itself. My entire life had been built around exceptions. Me shrinking so Savannah could expand. Me absorbing consequences so she could avoid them. Now, for the first time, someone was drawing a line where my family never had. When McCarthy left, the parking lot felt too big and too quiet. I sat on the curb, staring at that empty asphalt. This should have felt like victory, like reclaiming something. Instead, guilt twisted around my ribs. My parents' voices replayed in my mind. Selfish. Dramatic. Ungrateful. The words I'd been branded with since childhood. Walking back to my building, I felt hollow. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt foreign. I made tea but it tasted metallic. I sat on the couch in the dark, city lights flickering against the windows, and let myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. Reporting your own family isn't clean. It scrapes at every old loyalty, every inherited script. But when I thought of Savannah behind my wheel, maybe laughing, maybe posting photos like it was hers, my stomach twisted. She hadn't called. Not once. Not even to ask if I was okay. Neither had my parents. That silence said everything. Later, my phone lit up. Unknown numbers. Relatives. All echoing the same message. Drop the report. Don't ruin the family. Be understanding. One cousin left a voicemail. Clara, what you're doing is cruel. She's your sister. How can you do this to her? Not a single call asking if I had a way home. Not one person wondering how I was supposed to get to work the next day. For the first time, I didn't answer. It wasn't strength. It was exhaustion. And somewhere in that exhaustion, something new took shape. Resolve. They had crossed a line. And this time, I wasn't going to erase it. 3 days after I filed the report, the call came while I was at my desk. I'd barely slept, barely eaten, living in that suspended place between fear and stubbornness. My coworkers had noticed. One asked if I was okay. I just nodded and said I was dealing with some family stuff. When my phone buzzed with Officer McCarthy's name, my breath caught. We located your vehicle, she said. Your sister was stopped for speeding near Aurora. The car has been impounded. Impounded. The word hit like a wave. Relief, anger, dread, all tangled together. And Savannah? I asked quietly. She's fine. She's being questioned now. Fine. Of course she was fine. My hands trembled as I thanked her and hung up. The guilt surged again. Thick, Suffocating. Savannah in a police station. My parents panicking. My relatives sharpening their phones to call me the villain. But underneath the guilt, something colder pulsed. A sense of justice I hadn't felt in years. That evening, I drove a rental to the impound lot. The warehouse sat behind a chain-link fence, bright floodlights slicing through the dusk. A clerk handed me forms without looking up. Camry. Silver. Space 34. The concrete echoed under my steps as I followed the numbers, heart pounding harder with each row. And then I saw it. My car. But not the car I'd left in that parking lot days earlier. Fast food wrappers everywhere. Makeup smeared on the passenger door. An energy drink spilled across the console, leaving a sticky residue. Mud caked on the mats. My emergency blanket crumpled in the back like trash. The gas tank was nearly empty. She'd only had it for 3 days. I started. I know, a voice behind me said. I turned. Officer McCarthy. I swallowed hard. Savannah. My sister. McCarthy studied the interior and exhaled long. This kind of carelessness isn't unusual. People treat what they don't earn differently. Her tone wasn't judgmental. Just honest. Brutally honest. I braced my hands on the door frame, breathing deeply. The anger that had simmered for years bloomed into something sharp and clear. Everything made sense now. The bike in the mud at 18. The savings taken for her class. The laptop handed to her like she was royalty. They had taught Savannah something dangerous, that consequences were optional. But not this time. After the paperwork was done, McCarthy handed me the keys and paused before turning away. Whatever happens next, she said quietly, remember, accountability isn't cruelty. That line followed me all the way home. A week later, I found myself sitting in a hard wooden chair outside courtroom 4B. The air smelled like disinfectant, old paper, and nerves. My parents sat across the hall, whispering sharply in Spanish. Savannah sat between them, staring at the floor, her leg bouncing constantly. She wouldn't look at me. When the clerk called the case, we filed inside. The judge was a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like stone. She read through the paperwork before looking at Savannah. Miss Mitchell, she said, I understand you wish to enter a plea today. Savannah nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Please read your written statement aloud. I didn't blink. I wanted to hear every single word. Savannah unfolded the paper with shaking hands. I, Savannah Mitchell, admit that I took my sister's vehicle without permission. I knew the car was not mine. I took it anyway because I assumed she would forgive me. What I did was wrong. I'm sorry. For the first time in a long time, Savannah sounded like an adult. Not a child cushioned by excuses. The judge nodded. Let the record reflect a guilty plea. I felt my pulse in my throat. Given the circumstances, this court sentences the defendant to 6 months of probation, a 1-year license suspension, and restitution to the victim for impound fees. The gavel hit wood. My parents gasped audibly. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father tensed like someone had punched him. But what stunned me most wasn't their reaction. It was how quickly they moved to Savannah, wrapping her in comfort, shielding her from consequences even as consequences finally arrived. They didn't look at me. Not once. As the courtroom emptied, I stood still, letting them pass. Savannah walked by, inches from me. Her face was red, eyes swollen. She hesitated like she might speak, but my mother's hand on her arm tugged her forward. Not now, my mother whispered. Don't let her make this worse. Her. Like I was the threat. Like I was the problem. When the door closed behind them, something inside me settled. Heavy, but steady. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't trembling. I felt anchored. Like the part of me that had spent decades apologizing for existing had finally taken its last breath. Outside, the Denver sky hung low and gray. I walked to my car, the same car that had been violated, trashed, stolen, and sat inside. I ran my fingers along the steering wheel. Mine. It hadn't felt like mine for a long time. Not just the car. My life. My boundaries. My voice. But in that moment, sitting in the aftershock of everything, something shifted. My parents had walked away from me. but I had walked back to myself. I drove home slowly, letting the silence wrap around me. Every mile felt like distance between the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. When I reached my apartment, the air felt different, like stepping into a room I'd just finished cleaning. I placed the courtroom papers on the counter, made myself tea, and sat by the window. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't grieving. I was reclaiming. And somewhere deep in my chest, a small voice whispered a truth I'd never allowed myself to say. This wasn't the destruction of a family. It was the beginning of my freedom. In the weeks that followed, the noise around the case slowly faded. The calls from relatives stopped. The guilt quieted. And for the first time, my life didn't feel like a battlefield I had to hold together with both hands. I moved to a new apartment on the west side of Denver, closer to the foothills, where the air felt lighter. I changed my number, kept only the contacts who treated me with respect. My days settled into a rhythm. Quiet mornings. Long walks. Evenings where I finally listened to the kind of silence that didn't demand anything from me. Every Thursday, I joined a small support group at a community center. Boundaries and healing. People who carried scars that looked a lot like mine. The first time I spoke, my voice shook, but the room didn't shrink from my story. They nodded. They understood. And little by little, something inside me loosened. I had my car back, but more importantly, I had myself back. One afternoon, sitting in the driver's seat overlooking the mountains, I realized something simple and freeing. Justice hadn't ruined my family. It had restored me. A year later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. Plain. Unmarked. But written in handwriting I recognized instantly. Savannah. Inside was a short letter. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She didn't blame anyone. She simply wrote that she was in therapy now, learning what responsibility really means. Learning how to live without taking from others to stay afloat. And she ended with, I know I hurt you. I'm trying to be better. I folded the letter once, slipped it into a drawer, and felt no rush to reply. Some stories don't need a reunion to have closure. Sometimes acknowledgement is enough. As I locked my car that evening, the steering wheel club catching a stripe of orange sunset, a quiet truth settled in me. What's mine stays mine. Not because I guard it with fear, but because I finally learned to protect the person behind the boundaries. Thanks for listening, and if you like this story, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice when family asks you to stay silent. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw a line in the sand and refuse to erase it.